So, how did you apply for these grants that made your professional development possible? Tell us the process. We had an auction last year. Thank you for the many of our parents that came and other friends of the school supported the school in a really powerful way. And then we had this fund. And how did you end up in Dublin and in Ithaca? What was your route?
So for me, I love learning about learning. And I've been a teacher at Trinity for a long time. So when I heard about this opportunity, I thought about, oh, I could take a reading course or a math course. I've done a lot of those. And then I found out about this experience, and it was unlike anything I've ever done.
Yeah.
And
How did you find out about it?
just looking around the internet. Now, I do know a lot about the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. We use it a lot in first grade as a
Okay.
tool. We watch webcams and things like that. So I knew about it, but I didn't know about this educator retreat. And when I read about it, it was exciting, not just because of the bird aspect, but because it was going to teach me some things that I felt like were really true to Trinity, this inquiry-based learning, citizen science with our digital learning initiative, and even the STEM as we were kind of exploring that more with lower school science this year. And to be honest, it seemed a little bit indulgent. I thought, oh, surely they won't let me do this. It seems so much fun. But I went ahead and did the application, and so I was able to have the experience.
Well, that's interesting you should say that. I mean, this is exactly what these grants are for, to do the kind of professional development that normally within a Trinity budget, we just aren't able to support. So
Yeah, I've been a teacher for over 20 years and have never done anything like this before. So it was fun.
yeah, it's a great investment though, because I think what you'll bring into the classroom is so valuable. Aaron, tell us about your route. How did you get to
wow.
Dublin?
Yeah, I attended the auction, and I sort of caught a sense of adventure from the auction, and I started to dream a little bit, and I actually turned in my first application for professional development to go to a conference in Nashville, and I thought a little harder, and I thought, is that really what I want to do? I think I have a bigger dream than that. And so
Celtic music instead of country music.
Celtic music instead of country music, precisely. And actually, by the way, I did do a little bit of Irish dancing
Did you?
with a live band while I was there. It was
Well, maybe
great.
you can demonstrate. here.
Oh yeah. That'll be the next thing.
I'll
I
do the floss and you can do the
But I thought about if I could dream big, where would I go? And I teach about Ireland every fall, and it's just been on my heart for a long time to go there and to study the things that are there. And I want to tell you later about when I visited some monastic ruins when I was there. A very powerful experience. But I found a program for educators that met all the criteria that I wanted. I would get to see the Book of Kells, study the literature, some of which I teach. And I applied through them. I got accepted, and I applied through Trinity, and Trinity helped pay the way. Yeah.
So each of your applications, along with others, the school is able to support a number of teachers. You're just two of many that did things this summer. And they were submitted to the academic staff, the division directors, Mason Goss and myself, and we approved the grants. And I'm so thankful that you all got to do that. And I hope that you're an inspiration to many of your colleagues to dream, and that many of them will get to do things like this in their own fields. So, Megan, tell us a little bit more about what you experienced in the class and what it was like. Yeah.
Yeah, so our mornings would start early at about 6 o'clock in the morning. We were out there bird
The
watching.
birds start early.
Yeah, and I had no idea bird watching is such serious business, but it is.
Yeah.
I got my own binoculars, and I learned an awful lot about bird identification that I hope to teach my first graders. I hope to go on a lot more bird walks with them and help them also learn to identify bird songs, even as we're traveling to and from specials. And then we participated in a STEM project where it was design your own bird feeder. And what was wonderful about this was it was things that I
And
could
excuse
do.
me, but
Yes.
STEM, for all of our parents,
Oh,
just
of
to make sure
course.
everyone knows.
Yeah, science, technology, engineering, and math.
Yeah.
And so this was a project that I could have done with my first graders on designing your own bird feeder, just using basically recyclable materials, but then also putting it outside and watching to see which feeder design the most birds went to. And then also I had an opportunity to conduct my own inquiry-based learning experience, which very similar to the scientific method. I worked with another teacher from Arizona, and we were able to do an experiment using an owl decoy at the feeder station. And again, that was something I could do with my first graders. We do need a feeder station at Trinity School, and I found the perfect spot. So
All
that's
right.
good.
I want to hear
Yeah.
about that. That's great.
But
Maybe that could be a good senior capstone for someone. So, Aaron, tell us a little bit about your program. I mean, what was a day like?
Sure. So every day we spent a long morning in class with a literature professor from Trinity College, and our main focus was Irish literature from around 1800 to 1950. So we got to study a lot of the big names you'd expect: Yeats, Joyce, other playwrights. I was especially surprised by our focus on Irish drama, because that's something I hadn't studied before at all. I've studied some poetry, some of Joyce's short stories, but I remember one of the most moving moments for me in those morning sessions was when we read the entirety of a very short Yeats play, the first play he wrote for the little theater he started that eventually became the National Theatre in Ireland. And we read this little 4-page play, and I was moved to tears by the end of it, just in this hot, stifling classroom with a bunch of English teachers reading aloud together. And I realized, wow, there's so much power in this literature that's been untapped for me.
Yeah.
And I'm still trying to figure out how do I bring that back, open up that power here.
Yeah.
And so mornings we would just spend kind of discussing and looking at literature in this classroom together, little windowless
Sorry to
room.
interrupt you, but one of the things in that story that's so powerful is just the power of experiencing the literature.
Exactly.
I know we spent a lot of time talking about the literature, writing about the literature, but
Yes.
it was the actual experience of reading the play that moved you, right?
Oh, exactly. And it was, for me, the play, if I had read it here, it would have meant something entirely different. But I was reading it a quarter mile from the location where it was first staged, after a lengthy discussion of all the historical business behind the play.
Yeah.
And then it just opened up like a prism. It was beautiful.
So you learned something about the importance of place, too.
Place,
Yeah.
context. There are so many ways to enter into a piece of literature, and this was a big one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
So then the afternoons, after we'd have these morning classes, we'd come back, we'd hear lectures about all kinds of topics. The first lecture that we heard about was the history of the banshee in Irish mythology.
Yeah.
It was very entertaining, and by someone who'd done their PhD on it, a professor at the university, and it was just so wonderful to learn about, because one of the things I teach about with the Book of Kells is the way in which sort of the pagan Irish past influenced Christianity and Christian art in Ireland. So to learn just another nugget about, from a native expert, that would influence my teaching and understanding of that.
Yeah.
It's great. And then in the evenings, we'd often do tours of famous sites around the city, or even sometimes in place of lectures we would. Like we went to a house where Oscar Wilde had been raised, and went to see famous statues, monuments, hear about the history,
Yeah.
people's lives and accomplishments.
That's great. So, Megan, tell us about a bird. Tell us about a bird you learned something about.
Well, There were a lot of birds there, ones that I had not seen here. Cedar waxwings, pileated woodpeckers. And one of the things that we were able to do while we were out on these bird watching trips was to participate in this type of citizen science, which was
Yeah, explain that.
yeah. So that is something I'm really excited about. It's the opportunity almost for the children or for whoever to be the eyes and ears of scientists where they are. So, in other words, the Lab of Ornithology has a program called eBird, and it allows you during a 10-minute window when you are out bird watching to log the birds that you see, and the data that you use goes into a larger database along with people that are doing it all around the world. And scientists then use that data to track things like migration patterns and things like that. And they've been doing it for about 20 years now.
Yeah.
And the data that they've collected has been remarkable. And so it really allows, I think, the children to see that they are part of a bigger picture.
Yeah.
And really to view themselves as scientists, not just at Trinity, but in Durham and North Carolina and beyond. And so I'm really excited to do that with my first graders, but also it was wonderful to discover that these projects are happening in all different areas of science. So I was able to look and think about some of the new units that some of the lower school teachers are going to be doing and how they might be able to participate in some citizen science projects with their classes.
Yeah, that's really exciting.
Yeah, it was neat.
And I don't know that all of our lower school parents are aware, but we're doing a focus on science and science curriculum this year. And so it's exciting, what you've learned, what you can bring back to your colleagues.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think of also how you could use the nature preserve in the back of the school, which also connects to the Hollow Rock trails that are accessible down on Irwin Road now. And there is just all kinds of possibilities, I
There
think.
are a lot of opportunities.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be neat for us to be able to explore even just those different habitats that we have at Trinity School and then graph our results
Yeah,
there.
that would be great.
So,
The ticks notwithstanding. Let's go for it.
yeah, we've done that.
Yeah. Well, Aaron, tell us about the Book of Kells.
Oh, brilliant. Where to begin? Let me step back from that question for just a second and say that, coming back to the question of experiential learning, is that so often it's different to read a historical, even an interesting secondary source about a historical place, person, or their work, as opposed to going to the place where they were born, where they lived, and people have put together an exhibit with artifacts from their life and their experience. And that's one of the things that I found so intriguing about my time there, was visiting a Yeats exhibit that had things like little doodles that he had done or outfits that he had worn. Just the texture of history became this living thing in the place and these exhibits around it. And so then back to Kells, where the exhibit that they created around this book was so elaborate and so beautiful. The book is no bigger than this, and it has its own room, like this sacred room that people huddle around the text. And it is a sacred text. It's a Latin copy of the four Gospels, and the most beautifully illustrated of that entire time period. But before you even get to the room, you walk through room after room where you're learning about the background, and you're reading really obscure poems that monks had written in the side margins of other texts about how difficult it was to produce these manuscripts. And so by the time you get there, you're so primed to see it. And one of the things that I found most amazing was just studying the kind of physical materials they used to make these books. The vellums or the calf skins that they used, that they had to spend hours and hours preparing before they could even put a word of the gospel down. Then the inks that would take weeks to prepare, and all the different pigments they had to use. And so it's just staggering to think. I have just a little image here of just one image where you can see that there's this kind of brown ink that they've used here to outline the figures, and then they've used all these pigments to color it in. And the brown ink is called iron gall ink. And I've become through this trip just fascinated with the material history of this. And I'm planning to teach my students some of this background, that no beautiful thing that we have came to being by accident. And that the hours and the blood and the sweat that went into it is invisible unless we're willing to be patient and to look. And so that's being at that exhibit and just getting to smell and see and feel all the things that went into the text, and then to see it. Yeah. And it was more intricate and beautiful than I'd ever imagined just teaching about it before.
That's great. I had the privilege of seeing it 3 summers ago. Going to, I remember that room and the beautiful Trinity Library. Just amazing place. So, well, Megan, I see you have your binoculars here.
I do.
You had some. Did you do anything with bird sounds?
We did.
Did you?
Yeah, we did. And I was amazed. Some of the bird watchers, that were there, I was there with such a diverse group of people, and not just teachers, some people that work for the National Wildlife Foundation, and just that people, just being able to identify birds by the sounds. And they even offer a course at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology that I hope to take, because I think sometimes, especially with the little ones, learning to use binoculars can be so tricky, and yet we hear those birds all the time. Yeah. And so helping them with that skill.
There's so many sounds that we take for granted just as ambient noise, and if in some ways, what you were talking about, paying attention to the things that are around us and realizing, there are several different birds out there, and
that's right.
Yeah. That's great. So, Aaron, you wanted to tell us about monastic ruins?
Oh, that's right. So, there's a bit of a funny story about my travel experience that the program ended on Sunday morning at the end of July, and I thought that my flight was leaving Sunday morning after the program ended. And on Saturday, I was getting ready to leave, and I checked my flight details and realized I'd booked my flight to leave on Monday instead. And so I was in for a surprise, but that opened up room at the end of my trip to do a little bit more travel than I'd expected. Okay. So I quickly bought a bus ticket to a nearby national park called the Wicklow Mountains National Park. And it has this beautiful set of monastic ruins from, I think, the 12th century. And there were 2 things that stood out to me about it. One was the way that these buildings were constructed entirely of stone. Even the roofs of the buildings of the chapel was built of stone. It was so solid and so secure and had withstood so much time. And going there, everyone was just rendered quiet by it. And it sits in this just beautiful valley, and I could hardly imagine being someone who lived and worked and prayed in that place with that kind of solidity and natural beauty around me. I was really moved by that. And then I was on a hike in the park, and you can see a place where a hermit had lived in a cave right above the water and had chiseled a little window out of this cave so that the sunrise could come in. And I wondered, what would it be like to be so devoted and to just wait for the sun every day and to let that begin your prayer? It was so beautiful.
Yeah. Oh, that's special. That's great. And Megan, you had a story that you were telling me about a T-shirt that you wore and what the conversations that sparked.
Yeah, so I knew that one day of my time there was going to be kind of school spirit day. So we were going to be asked to wear our school shirt, and while I was going to the program, I was also reading our summer read as a faculty, so A Grander Story by Rick Hove, and so I was really thinking about that idea and struck by the idea of just me being a part of a grander story. And so when I went up there for my school shirt, I wore my oldest son Brian's old track shirt. And that year, on the back of all the team shirts, they had written, I am third. And I was there, and it was again such a diverse group of people. And so there I was with my shirt that said I am third on the back, and it really did spark a lot of questions. A lot of people asked me, what does that mean? Like, were you in third place, or did you play third base? And I just got to say, no.
Third born.
Yeah, none of that. But I just got to say, I teach at a Christian school, and on the back of their shirts, the kids wore this, I am third, to be reminded that they really are third. Christ first, others or their team second, and themselves third. And it would just give people pause. And it also allowed me to get to know other Christians that were there also. So I just looked at it as a great opportunity of me to
That's a great
share a little
story.
bit of Trinity with that program. So.
Yeah, that's a great story. It's "I am third" is a great paraphrase of non nobis, of our
Yes.
school motto. Not to us, Lord, not to us, but to your name be the glory.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing with me and with the Trinity community about your experience. And I can't wait to see the rich ways in which this is going to impact your teaching and have ripple effects to others too, as you talk to other teachers. And so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.